So I'm Mona, everyone. Nice to see you all. I was called to the bar in November 2004, and I finished pupillage in September 2007. So I've been on my feet for, 13 years, which it doesn't feel that way at all. So I had a fairly standard journey to the bar, I suppose, with a bit of a gap. So I did my law degree straight out of high school in Cardiff, and went straight into what was then called the bar vocational course immediately after graduation. So finished that in 2004. I started applying for pupillages probably in my third year of university, and applied sort of third year, bar school year. Didn't get anywhere on either of those 2 years, and ended up doing a job as a legal advisor in, I don't know if you guys have heard of a company called DAS. If you've got a car insurance or home insurance, you may find that your legal expenses insurance is with them, and they have a legal advice department. So I stayed there for about a year, and then eventually got pupillage in what was, so it wasn't Civitas then, it was 33 Park Place Chambers, which was a common law set. So they did crime and family and civil. And I had a mixed pupillage, but with a real focus on civil. So I spent most of my time doing civil work, but had some really exciting experience in crime. I think my pupil master had like 4 murder trials in the 3 months that I was with him. So I had lots of really interesting experience. Yeah, and then I got taken on as a tenant, thankfully. And then I think within a few weeks of my tenancy, that's when things started to change in 33, and it eventually resulted in the creation of Civitas Chambers in 2008. And I've been there ever since. And my practice probably went from doing, you know, a mixed bag of sort of in that year when we were still 33, sort of doing crime and civil. And then I focused more on civil, mainly public law. So lots of immigration and asylum work, judicial review. I do it on both sides. So I'm on what's called the Attorney General's Panel of Counsel and the Welsh Government Panel of Counsel. So I represent government departments and ministers, etc., in judicial review challenges, which is super interesting. And I do employment law, representing employers mostly. So yeah, that's basically been sort of my journey in terms of practice. And then I've been a deputy district judge since May of 2019. COVID has been interesting. So we're pretty much up and running as sort of working remotely most of the time. I mean, for example, today I was sitting in Cardiff Court. I had to physically go into the building, but all the hearings were done on telephone, so I didn't see anybody else at all. And that's, I'd say probably that's the majority of how the work is going. There are some things in person, but with lots of really strict social distancing and limiting the number of people, which you guys have probably may have seen the sort of other side of, in the sense that you're being, if you've tried to go to court to watch hearings, you probably haven't been able to over the past few months because of the maximum number of people allowed in a room at any one time. And so, yeah, it must be, I suspect it's sort of posing you guys lots of challenges in terms of pupillage applications and getting the experience that you all want before you're ready to make an application. Probably it from me. Over to you, Dominic.
Thank you, Mona. Yeah, I mean, my journey to the bar was pretty straightforward, with a hop, skip and a jump to London, really. I did my law degree in Cardiff, and then I went to London to do my bar course in the University of Law. Living there was quite tough. I mean, the bar course is tough as it was, but I mean, living in a studio flat in Harrow on top of that probably wasn't the best thing for me to do. But I learned quite a lot from it, and I was able to sort of hone in where I wanted to practice. And when I was coming to the end of my bar course, I found it pretty difficult applying for pupillage. I didn't get hardly any second round interviews at the end of my bar course year when I applied. I had quite a number of first rounds outside of London, but found it really difficult getting anywhere in London because of my background. And well, it's sort of a double-edged sword really, because I was applying for places in London and they were saying you're going to go back to Cardiff. So why do you want to stay here? And then when I was applying for places outside of London, it was quite difficult because they were saying that you're obviously in London for a reason. So it was quite difficult, but I mean, living in that environment and pushing myself to that, to living in that environment, I think it made me hone in where I wanted to practice. And obviously that was back in Cardiff. Once I figured that out properly, and you can only come to that conclusion on your own, really. It took me a bit longer than most, I think, to realize that. But once I found that out, I applied again. So I was a bit lucky because the gateway started again 6 months after the gateway had finished, because they changed it from the August to the January. So I only had like a 6-month period where I applied again. And then that's when I had quite a number of second round interviews, which was trying to improve my interviewing and things like that. And from that, I got my interview at Civitas. And then that was in May 2017 that I found I got pupillage, and then I couldn't start till September 2018. So I had a bit of a gap to wait. So I, in that period, got a job as an assistant editor in practical law, which is the sort of the same umbrella really as Westlaw. And I worked there up until February 2018. And then I came home and had 6 months at home where I just worked in a local car dealership for 6 months to get some money, and then started my pupillage. So quite a bizarre way to go about it, and I wouldn't recommend going about that way, but I mean, you come to your own conclusions, I think. And I think that's the most important thing, is to realize where you want to be and how do you know you're going to get there, and then taking those steps then. When I started pupillage, I initially had somebody who did employment. I did that quite a lot to begin with. My second supervisor was Rachel, and I did quite a lot of housing and sort of chancery, trusts, property sort of stuff. And then third supervisor was Simon Hughes. That was a lot of PI, but obviously by that point I was on my feet. So I was quite busy in court at that point. Very diverse pupillage, so I probably can speak more to pupillage at Civitas than most people, other than Izzy really, at how diverse it is. So one day you'd be in the county court doing some property dispute, the next day you're in the immigration tribunal doing an asylum appeal, and then the day after that you're in an employment tribunal, or you're doing some housing work or something like that. So it is very varied, and that's what I quite like about it at this early stage, because I don't necessarily know exactly where I want to end up. So having a wide breadth at pupillage was very, very helpful. Unfortunately, that, because of the coronavirus, has halted slightly. I got tenancy in 2019. So I've been a tenant for just over a year. So unfortunately, my first year of tenancy was halted by the coronavirus pandemic. But I think it has changed a lot, in the sense that it's a lot of virtual hearings. It's a lot of my work has pretty much diminished, but it still keeps you going. And I think sometimes when you have maybe 1 or 2 cases a week, you sort of concentrate more on those 2 cases than you would usually if you had 5 or 6 or 7. So I feel like I am improving myself as an advocate during that time. But I mean, I'm just hoping that it just goes back to normal soon. And I'm pretty sure it will. At the moment, my work consists of going to the magistrate's court to do particular police orders and applications, and immigration work. I think those are the two of the big things I'm doing at the moment. I have sort of civil stuff dotted about, and I have sort of paperwork dotted about, but that's pretty much mainly what it is at the moment. So I have first-hand experience on how they socially distance in magistrates' courts, because it is unbelievable. I mean, the first time I got there, they made me take my shoes off and put them.
Where was that?
In Llanelli.
Oh God.
So I turned up and everyone else had these shields on. I was obviously not aware, like we're not around people like that at that point. And I thought I was the one that was going into sort of incubation or something, because I had to take off pretty much everything to get through security. But all in all, I think it's been good, because I think a lot of cases can be dealt with virtually. And I hope that people a lot higher up than me realise the benefits of it. But yeah, I think that's the story up until now. Pupillage applications, they can be tough. They're very tough. You get a lot of rejection. I mean, it's about handling rejection, because you will get it at some point, and sometimes at great volume. But it's about realizing what your strengths are, taking some feedback from the ones that you do get disappointed from, and just keep moving forward. You will need a bit of luck to get pupillage. I think everyone does need a bit of luck to get it, from the right people at the right time, right questions, you're in the right mood, your brain's working properly, you've had proper breakfast and things like that. So, I mean, you do need a little bit of luck, but I think up until that point, I think it's really important just to work out where you're good and getting that CV really up to date. And I think the biggest advice I had when I was at bar school about pupillage interviews and advocacy, pupillage interviews and applications, was you are the world expert on you. So nobody else has any idea about what you've done other than you. So no matter how many good things you've done in your small and early career, the person across the table will have no idea. So it's about putting yourself out there, using good interview techniques that you'll just improve just by having loads of them, and just really trying to make yourself come across as the person that you are. And a lot of people find it difficult because of the pressures of interviews and quite how difficult questions can be. But if you are confident in you, then I think you'll be a lot better armed for when interviews come and applications. I've probably talked at length, so I'm open to some questions or anything like that.
No, that's good. Thank you. That was some really, really useful advice, and interesting to hear about both of your journeys. I was just going to say as well, we also have Crash, who's a future pupil barrister at Civitas. So I don't know if you want to introduce yourself and maybe a little bit about your journey as well.
Oh yeah, sure. Well, is this while we maybe wait for Izzy? But yeah, yeah. So my name's Crash, and like you just said, like I have an offer of pupillage to start at Civitas from September next year. So that's providing that I pass the bar training course in the year to come, which I'm studying here at Cardiff. But in terms of my journey, my initial degree was in politics and economics. So I graduated with that degree in 2015, and then I came back to Cardiff and spent 3 years working for a charity called Stonewall Cymru here. So I had a very small amount of career experience, and that was when I sort of wanted to be a campaigner working in the third sector, and for a number of reasons I kind of decided that wasn't right for me and that I wanted to be a barrister. So I left my job to do the GDL at Cardiff University with a plan to then do the bar course and then apply for pupillage. And so I had a go at sending off some applications during my GDL year, and I would really strongly encourage people to do that, because what I think a lot of people, especially on the GDL feel, and certainly what I felt, was that this decision to go into law was like such a recent decision. Like I was making these applications, and it was kind of like nine months or so after I'd made the really concrete decision that yes, I was going to try and become a barrister, and then suddenly you're like filling in these application forms. But it's absolutely worth doing. I mean, it paid off for me in terms of a pupillage offer, but my perspective going into it was very much managing those expectations. So not necessarily expecting to get an offer of pupillage out of it, but recognising that if I had a good go at my applications during the GDL year, it would put me in a stronger and more confident position if I had to make more applications the next year, and I'd have had some interview experience, and I would have got a bit more of a sense of what chambers were looking for, and also what I was looking for. So that's a big piece of advice that I would give, like if you're in your third year of your undergrad degree, or if you're doing the GDL, definitely don't think it's too soon or you should wait before making these applications, because I think the experience is really worthwhile, and you never know. And I think, yeah, that's maybe the main bit of advice that I would give. I think I have the advantage of also having had to apply for a number of jobs, and I think lots of the tricks about how you apply for a job are just very, very applicable to how you make good applications for pupillage. And that point that Dominic just made about being the world expert on yourself is definitely one of them. And I think there's an element of basically marketing yourself like a product, which sounds really horrible and capitalist, but it's thinking of kind of simple and effective ways of communicating who you are as an applicant, and what your story is about, and why you want to be a barrister, and what type of work you want to do, and what motivates you, and what type of person you are. If you can think of a really condensed way to communicate that. So for me, you know, the fact that I had this experience of working for a human rights charity and being interested in the policy world in Wales and in Welsh legal issues was like a nice story that I could present that would make a lot of sense to the panel that I was presenting it to, but in quite an accessible way. And everyone has their own story, but it's just finding out the effective and simple way of telling that really concisely, because then you can just put that at the top of your applications, or, you know, make sure that's a point you get to make in response to a question you're asked at interview.
Yeah, that's some really good advice, actually. And I was gonna say, I think you got a scholarship, did you, from an Inns of Court?
Oh yeah, because I guess, well, I don't know who's on this call. So is the balance mainly people who are about to do the bar course, I guess? Or do you have some people on the bar course?
I think it will be a range, I guess. We're recording the session, so it will be open to anyone, any law students at Cardiff Uni to watch. But I guess from my personal perspective, the scholarship deadline is in a couple of days for the...
Yeah.
So it's been a very busy time, but if you have any advice, because obviously you managed to get the scholarship, so any advice about the application or the interview process that you went through?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So it's so worth going for. I mean, it makes the difference for so many people from being able to do the bar course and not. It might be a bit too late to give advice about which inn to apply to, but in case it's not, I think one of the things to consider is they have different policies about interviewing people, and whether everyone gets an interview, or whether or not people with a good, or whether they're shortlisted for interview, whether they shortlist for interview. And for me, I knew that I had sort of strong enough, I looked strong enough on paper to go for one of the inns that shortlisted people on interview, because I applied for Gray's Inn, and if you got shortlisted, the statistic was something like 2/3 of people they shortlisted got some sort of award. So your odds were good if you could survive that initial sift. So you can make your own calculation about that. And also the thing that attracted me about Gray's Inn was that they offered fewer awards, but they were more in value. So if you're the type of person to whom, if you get a £3,000 award, that is not going to make a big difference in your capacity to undertake the bar course, and because you need more money than that, then that might make a difference if there are some inns that tend to offer at grades, and I think the minimum award was 5,000, but the average is somewhere between 10 and 15,000. So it's a lot more money rather than offering smaller amounts to many more people. So that can make a difference. But I don't know if I have any particularly good advice about writing applications other than just to pay attention to the questions and make sure you're including rather than experience and not missing stuff out. But there's lots of good advice that I can give for interviews.
Yeah, definitely.
That you might want to wait until you hear whether or not you've got one. But unless anyone has any questions about applying for scholarships and what to include on their application or anything that they're stuck on if they're working on an application, and I'm sure Mona and Dominic could help out with that as well.
I mean, I might take this as a personal opportunity because my
Well, why not?
But there is some very difficult questions on the application, but one I think I've spoken to a couple of students about would probably be good to get some advice on is what question would you like the panelists to ask you the most?
Oh gosh, that's hard.
I did not get asked that.
That's something that I personally struggle to answer, and I think I've spoken to a few different people that struggle to answer that one as well. But I don't know if you can think of any advice to give on that one.
So I would think about, you know, I was saying before about like this brand thing where you're like trying to communicate like who you are in a nutshell. Yeah. It might be tied to that. So if you are very, very interested about the future of human rights in the UK, as an example, and that is quite key to your approach to the law, and it's something you know a lot about, then maybe there's a way of like using this as an opportunity to bring that side of you out in the interview. Similarly, yeah, if there's a way that you can kind of use that, because I guess what I would say is that if they have that, they probably will ask you that question in the interview. So don't put something down that you can't answer well. But yeah, use it, I think, to your advantage. Like if there's something you want to show off about, or if there's a particular aspect about your motivation or your interests that you want to be able to bring to the fore, then use that as an opportunity.
It's pretty much a USP. It's what you've got as unique, and that is simply what it is. If you have some experience or some interests, like Crash said, or you have some knowledge about something in particular that you think makes you unique, as I said, you're the expert on what you've done. So if you think it's unique, then you put that down and you're able to then talk about it. I think something similar, a pupillage interview I had was, I was involved in a charity in London who was volunteering to represent mothers who their children were getting expelled from school. And you go to these governors' hearings, and then you basically take charge. You're cross-examining teachers. I mean, it was quite a great experience. And I mean, that's the sort of thing that I would say if I was asked that question. So you probably have something of similar experience or some similar interest. It's something that makes you unique, and I think that's probably the best way to tackle it.
Yeah, that sounds like a good advice. Good advice. Mona, do you have anything to?
Oh, I mean, I don't think so. I think what Crash and Dominic have said is 100% right. Like there must be something that, you know, and it's so, I mean, I'm the type of person that just finds it really cringe to talk about yourself, but everybody has something that if they actually are 100% honest with themselves is what they think is their amazing strength or this incredible journey they've been on or something that sets them apart. and you want that opportunity to say it. So think about that for a minute, and then formulate the question based on that. But yeah, I mean, I think I'd agree with what Crash has said. This is not an opportunity to sort of, you know, there's a fine line, I think, with applications where you not so much bluff, but you know, you're not going to talk about making coffee during the course of your work experience. You'll say exactly what you did, etc. So there's a fine line between sort of, you know, presenting what you've done in the best possible way and then completely bluffing, and I wouldn't bluff if I were you, because you know, you'll be caught out. And the one piece of advice, I mean, I went to a lot of interviews, I got through to a lot of second rounds, and then I didn't make the cut. And it gets to a point where it is just, it's really draining. And the one time that you know, my pupillage interview with 33 was the one that I think I was the most relaxed about, and it meant that I was 100% myself during the course of that interview. And you know, I think that's so key. I mean, I used to sit on the pupillage committee, I haven't in a while, but just talking to friends and colleagues that are on the pupillage committee, it's the ones that bluff, the ones that really come across as disingenuous and are just making up what they think the panel want to hear, are the ones that get themselves into trouble. The people that present themselves as 100% genuine and talk genuinely about their experiences and what they've done, they're the ones that you end up sort of establishing a rapport with the panel with, and the same on the application. So just bear that in mind.
Yeah, that all sounds really good. Thank you. I think, are we still waiting for Isabelle?
To be honest, I mean, I haven't heard from her. It's 6:30. I'm guessing if she hasn't joined or sent a message yet, that means she's still en route.
Yeah, that's all right. No,
yeah, sorry about that.
That's okay. I think we can go to a couple of questions. I think we've had a few in the chat. So why did you apply to Civitas? Was there anything that stood out compared to other chambers? I don't know who wants to take that one first.
Okay, well, so for me, like I said, it wasn't, Civitas didn't exist at the time. I mean, I suppose technically I was one of the sort of founding members, which sounds a lot more grand than it is, but you know, I was one of the 20 odd that was there, and 33 that did civil, and we made Civitas. But 33 for me, I mean, what inspired me, what I would say to somebody about joining Civitas and why you should join, is that we are the only chambers in Cardiff that do civil and public law exclusively from the traditional Cardiff chambers. I think Dominic will probably say more about this than me, but we're not the traditional chambers in the sense that you know, we bring pupils in to work them to the bone and make their lives a living hell for 12 months before then grilling them to decide on whether they're going to become tenants or not. We have a genuine interest in establishing a relationship with our pupils, because we spend so much time with them and so much of Chambers resource with them, and we do that with a view to them being members for the rest of their career. And you know, we've had some amazing pupils come through over the last few years. Dominic is definitely one of them, and so is Isabelle. You know, I'd like to think that we have a pretty laid back, friendly environment in Chambers. We've got an open door policy, and we speak, you know, everyone is always available in the event that somebody is stuck, whether it's literally in court and you don't know what to do with something, or whether you've got a set of papers that you're stuck on. And I think that sets us apart. So yeah, I mean, I can't tell you why I chose Civitas because of how my journey started, but maybe Dominic can add a bit to that as well.
Yeah, thanks, Mona. Yeah, I think there are maybe 3 reasons why I applied. The first one was that I wanted to come back to Wales. So that's probably the first bit. The second bit is the work itself, which is Mona has spoken to about, and the exclusivity of civil and public work is something you can't get anywhere in Wales, realistically. There's maybe one place in Swansea, but that's about it, really. The opportunities of working in so many different legal areas doesn't come to the other traditional common law chambers. It just doesn't, in the breadth that it comes to our chambers. So as I mentioned at the start, one day you're doing immigration, the next day you're doing housing, third you're doing property, fourth trusts, and then employment on day 5. I mean, it really is a very wide breadth of work, which I think is unrivaled, in the sense that if I had gone to a different chambers who just did family and crime and civil, then you're pretty much apportioned or put into a category, and you're stuck in that category for quite a bit. I have quite a lot of friends in other chambers where already they're specialising in an area, and Civitas offers you the opportunity to really put yourself out there in a lot of different places, and to find your own place in the civil world. And I think that's a really good opportunity. And then lastly is Mona touched this, the relaxed nature of chambers. It's informally formal or formally informal. It's whatever one you pick, it's that. And there isn't a detachment between higher members of chambers and the pupil, and you're not expected to carry around people's briefcases or anything. It's nothing like that. There are no offices in chambers, which I think helps the informality of it all, because everyone's in and out, well, under normal circumstances, everyone's in chambers and everyone's in and out of different rooms. And a lot of the time, especially at the junior end, sort of me, Alice, Izzy and Ian would sit in a table in a room all day and just discuss particular points that we may have or things like that. And you get that social vibe then. And then if somebody from chambers comes in, you go and have a drink or something. So it's a really relaxed environment, and it's really an environment where everybody wants you to succeed to your fullest potential. And from discussing it with my friends and things like that, that necessarily doesn't apply to all other chambers in Cardiff or Wales or anywhere else. And I think that is the big strong point, because pupillage is hard.
Oh,
Hi, sorry, my internet just went.
oh, bless you.
Let's have a look. Oh, I can't see the questions in the chat anymore.
Okay. The next one was, what was the interview process of pupillage at Civitas? I think Crash is probably the best to answer that. They've just gone through that process itself, but I'll just open briefly. It's a 2-stage process. There's a sifting process, first round, second round's advocacy. I think there's about maybe 5 or 6 people, 5 or 6, I think. But I mean, you might think that's daunting, but you just get used to that amount of people being in the room. So yeah, I think it's tough. But again, I think if you show yourself in the right light and show your strengths, I think with the right bit of luck on the day, I think you will you'll find it's quite a difficult but quite interesting interview process, really. But I think Crash is better than me to answer that.
So potentially not, because when I had my interview at Civitas, it was about a month into lockdown, and
Oh yeah, of course.
So like lots of chambers, so quite rapid adjustments were being made to the recruitment process. So I didn't have 2 interviews with Civitas, I just had 1, and they went straight to the sort of final round. So I knew that I was up against 5 people, so it was very pressure on, and they combined the advocacy and the other elements of the interview into one quick session. So it was different that year, and I would anticipate maybe that was a reaction to sort of very pressing circumstances, and maybe they'd move back to multiple rounds in the future, but I can't speak to that because I have no idea. First of all, I thought the interview went terribly. And which is a good lesson to not think, to not place too much reliance on your own interpretation of how interviews have gone, because clearly I did something right. But I thought I was quite nervous, as you might be, although hopefully I didn't let it show too much. And there were bits of the interview that I really enjoyed. Like, I quite liked the advocacy bit, and I thought that went well. But there were some questions that I was worried about whether or not I'd responded well to, and that's what made me think I'd done poorly. I think in general with interviews, I think you have to accept that when you're doing pupillage, at least part of the interview is going to be a test to see how you respond to questions under pressure, and possibly even how you respond to questions from somebody who's not trying to make you feel at ease, because so much of your work as a barrister is going to be getting questions from a prickly judge who doesn't like you. And so you have to have the discipline to accept that it's not personal, and that doesn't mean that you're not doing well in the interview. So that's what I would say. But yeah, in terms of the process, when I did it, it was just one, but who knows if that'll carry on into the future. And you can feel good about some bits of an interview and not so good about other bits of it.
Yeah, thank you. I don't think we have any more questions. I was just going to ask one myself. So obviously, because of the circumstances of everything that's gone on, a lot of mini-pupillages have been postponed or cancelled. I know I had one lined up at Civitas actually over the summer that has been postponed to January. But obviously with applications and pupillage applications coming up as well now, do you have any advice as to how to match that sort of level of experience if you don't have as many minis on your application?
I mean, I suppose, you can be rest assured that, everybody else in your cohort that are applying at the same time will be in the same boat. So don't stress too much about that. I don't think it's going to be held against you. And I think you should, where the application form allows you, make sure you list as much as you can what mini pupillages you would have had during this last few months, whether it's with Civitas or with anyone else, and that it's been postponed. Depending on, when I've been approached by people that have asked for not so much mini pupillages, but just informal work experience or what have you, the only thing that I've been able to sort of realistically offer anyone is, because obviously court hearings, whilst they are, even when they're remote, they are still public hearings unless there are specific restrictions for a particular reason on a case. And the courts issue a link to the hearing, especially if it's a video one. And if you've got sort of links with barristers or what have you, and I know that many are willing to share the CVP links with sort of people like yourselves, so that you can listen in and watch. Obviously, it's nowhere near the same experience as physically being in a courtroom. But who knows when we're going to be all allowed in a courtroom again. So you take what you can. And I think there was a virtual pupillage fair that was being run in London. And I think they were supposed to have two events. They've had one in the beginning of October, and I think they've got another one in December. Crash, you're nodding your head. Maybe you know more about it, but I'm sure I can dig out the link because I know I came across it and sent it to somebody. But just look out for things like that, I think. And as I said, don't worry too much, because anyone that's applying in your year is going to come across the same problem. So don't feel like you're at a disadvantage.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Have you had any mini pupillages yet?
Not as of yet, because I've had them
Okay.
cancelled or postponed, which is I have speaking to a lot of students as well, and probably people that watch this recording back will be in the same situation. So it's probably good to get some advice on what to fill your application with instead. If we don't have any more questions, or if you guys don't have any more advice or things to say about the next couple years for us.
I mean, I don't know, I guess, so when I was sort of at the stage you guys were at, I had so much negativity being thrown in my direction, it was unreal, in terms of the number of competition and, you know, what profile you are and where you're going to fit, and, oh gosh, you're only going to get a pupillage if the Chambers is looking, you know, to sort of exercise positive discrimination, and oh gosh, you only need to be in a wheelchair and then you'll be fine, you've covered all the sort of, you know, protected characteristics, so they weren't called that back then, but you know what I mean. And it's just, you just need to put all of that to one side, and like everybody has said so far, just be yourself. Don't take the rejections personally, because sometimes they aren't. It is just down to, you've got two stellar candidates who've done really, really well, and it's a judgment call that the panel have to make, and it's not necessarily a criticism of the other or that the other isn't good enough, but you've got one pupillage slot to fill, so somebody has to make, you know, somebody has to go on the pass side, if you get what I mean, and just remember that really, and take the feedback from the interviews where Chambers offer it, and I think these days most Chambers offer feedback and provide quite constructive feedback. Whether you agree with it or not is another matter, and take that and learn from it, and just keep going. I mean, I've got people in my year group who applied consistently for 5 years, and then to stop the clock running on their bar qualification, they then cross-qualified and became solicitors, kept applying for pupillage, eventually got it, and they are now successful at the bar. If this is what you want to do, just keep going and you'll get there.
I would echo that as well. It's, if you want it, you have to really want it, and just do things to help yourself get there. I mean, it's one of those places, and one of those jobs where you're probably told a lot that, oh, you're not going to make it, there's only so many jobs, and you'll hear a lot of that, especially if you start your bar course and things like that. But it's about pushing all that away, and if you want it bad enough, then you'll get it. It's the people that sort of half-heartedly want to do it, have a few mini pupillages and think, oh, well, I'll do this and I'll do that and maybe I'll get an interview. Those are the ones that don't succeed. You need to want it. You need to want it a lot and then work towards that. Also, a last little tip is there is a thing called silence by rejection, and rejection by silence. And that is basically you writing applications, taking hours and hours and hours to do it, and then you don't hear anything back. And that's okay. I mean, you will get them. And it's, again, as Mona was saying, not to take them personally, because it's about having that goal in mind. As your end goal is you want to be a barrister, and it's just keep going down that road. And if you have a roadblock, you knock that away and you just keep going down that road until you get there. But I think that's probably all I could really say.
Yeah, thank you so much. Crash, do you have any final comments?
No, I'll say some things. So I really agree with the point that Mona made a while ago about the importance of being genuine and not succumbing to the temptation of trying to pass yourself off as the person you think that whatever panel wants you to be, because people do see through it, and it's really tempting. But the more you can show of your true self, I think, the better you always come across, and that applies to scholarship applications as well as pupillage stuff, because I think part of the application process is saying I'm really talented and I'm really brilliant and I would be a great barrister, but also part of it is being someone who are like, I'm an interesting and engaging person who would be a good person to work with, which is a separate part of it. And if you're really bright, but you come across as maybe being a bit obnoxious or like you're not very self-aware, then that can count against you. So it is a really dangerous thing to flirt with, and I think it's really good advice to warn against it, because it stops you from presenting your true self, and that's always what people really react to and really enjoy seeing in a candidate. And it makes your life as someone, if you have to see like 20 people do the same interview time after time, and they're all like smart academically and they've got good results and interesting CVs, the thing that will stand you out is what's interesting and unique about you, and that's really specific to you. A really specific point that you said about what about mini-pupillages have been cancelled, I would say include those in your scholarship application. Like, I think sometimes you have to be a bit cheeky with the forms and what they look like, but if they ask you what mini-pupillages you've done, I think put in this mini-pupillage scheduled for November 2020 in brackets cancelled or postponed or whatever it is. Like, obviously don't claim to do stuff that's been postponed, make it clear that it was postponed, but if you can slot it in, it's relevant stuff for them to take into consideration. So I think where you've got a bit of leeway, be cheeky about making sure the relevant information is included in your forms. Although you can't get mini-pupillages, or it might be hard to get them at the moment, I think conversations with barristers, even if you can't get a proper placement, at whatever opportunity you have to get them, are so useful. So events like this, but also the pupillage fairs that Mona said, because if you've got a sense of what it's like to be a pupil at a criminal set, which you won't have automatically as a law student, you'll only get that from speaking to young practitioners who will tell you what their pupillages are like, then you're in a really informed position to go into this. And you can get that from mini-pupillages, but if you can't get mini-pupillages, you can get that information from other ways. Like, when I heard what like criminal pupils do, like when you hear about these you know, when you do the client work at the mags and you get a list like of 8 people that you have to prosecute one after another, and you get the details on the day. I heard about that and I was like, that's not what I want to do. That sounds incredibly depressing. That sounds like work that I would hate. I never wanted to do criminal work, but now I'm convinced that I actually hate being required to do even a small amount of criminal work at the start of, and so that really made the choice for me to apply to Civitas. But I wouldn't have had that knowledge if I'd not had a conversation with someone who was at a common law set at a pupillage fair, and I heard firsthand the kind of reality of the work they do. So make the most of those conversations.